Hello, I'm Bjorn, movie archaeologist, and welcome back to the Temple of Movie Reviews. And today we've got a very mediocre movie to talk about. I'm just going to get this out of the way. Today's film is The Haunted Mansion, and I have quite a few thoughts on this particular movie. Now, this is a reboot of an adaptation of a theme park ride, so you can say the source material is limited. But that being said, I almost like parts of this movie, and that makes it worse. I'm going to be pretty negative in this review, so I'm going to get this out of the way now. If you are a parent or you have a young children, I don't know how many of my subs have that, but this movie might be good for them, actually. They might like this quite a bit. You might even find some stuff you like in it. But for me, I found this movie to be frustrating. It wants to act like it's actually kind of an adult film at times, but then it'll go back into sort of like a childlike view. It's rated PG-13, yet its target audience seems to be 12 and under. I don't know quite what this movie is going for here. I personally didn't find it to be that interesting, outside of a few choices that I feel like don't fit with the rest of the movie's identity. So, without further ado, I'm going to get into some spoilers here. That being said, I don't know that you should maybe wait for streaming on this one. I'll discuss some things. There's not actually all too much to spoil in the grand scheme of things, so you don't actually really even have to worry about spoilers too much. The plot isn't really the focus of this movie, in my opinion. So let me just go ahead and get into it. So right off the bat, this movie starts interesting. It actually kind of hooked me for the first 7 or 8 minutes. I actually got a couple laughs. I think the only real laughs I had in the movie were near the beginning. We opened on the main character. He's played by an actor called Lakeith Stanfield, who I only knew previously from the very bad Netflix live-action Death Note. And, it's a shame, because he was the better part of that movie, and he's easily the best part of this movie. And I feel bad for the guy, because he seems to be fairly talented, and what I've seen him in is like a role where he gives a fairly good performance, but is otherwise wasted, and, that's got to kind of blow for him, So I hope you get one where the writing is competent. The opening scene of this movie features a man meeting a girl at a bar, and they have a cute little conversation, and then it smash cuts to that same man as an alcoholic wreck, mourning the death of the woman who he went on to marry. And that was a surprisingly dark place for the movie to go immediately. And that sort of theme prevails through with this character. He is in horrible grief, and he can't seem to get over it. And as the movie goes on, he works through his issues, and they're paralleled with a young boy who I also really liked in this movie quite a bit. He had a lot of the funnier moments and some of the nicer emotional moments at the end of this movie. So basically, there's about 20 minutes of good movie in here, maybe even 30, mostly involving the exploration of grief, the main character's sort of emotional turmoil, and his reflection and sort of connection to the young boy in the haunted house, as well as some cool visuals of ghosts and manipulated hallways and twisting labyrinths, mostly taken directly from the ride. Some of the ghost designs are really cool, but all the good ones are basically lifted from the ride. There's a theme here, a trend. Anytime this movie tries to do something of its own, it fails. And you might be thinking, well, Bjorn, what do you mean? Well, I looked into this movie on my own separately after I came out of it, because I had a creeping suspicion in the back of my mind, and I needed to see it through. I had to check and see if I was correct. And boy, what I found was interesting and made me interpret this movie in a way I bet most general audiences wouldn't, and I bet most reviewers won't. So let me go into that now. I remembered hearing briefly that at one point Guillermo del Toro was attached to direct and write this, and that Ryan Gosling was going to star, and those are some pretty powerful names in Hollywood. When I hear Ryan Gosling is attached to a project, I usually have an expectation that movie will be good. He tends to pick very good scripts. And Guillermo del Toro is, in my opinion, a very consistent and excellent filmmaker, and whose vision would really, really fit this particular film. His style would be perfect for it. I mean, look at his work, look at the sort of aesthetic the Haunted Mansion is going for. That's a match made in heaven. So obviously that fell through. I don't know why. I think probably a disagreement between Disney and Del Toro, but I don't have any, I don't have proof for that. That just seems to be what tends to happen with Disney in these projects. They get someone very creative like Edgar Wright, and they attach them to a project. And when Edgar Wright tries to make an Edgar Wright movie, they panic because it's weird and interesting, and they pull the plug and hire someone like Patton Reed. And then years later, you wind up with Ant-Man Quantumania. And I think that was what happened here. If I had a suspicion, and this is a suspicion, I don't know, I could be very incorrect, I suspect that elements of this movie are leftovers from Guillermo del Toro. Some of the cooler visuals, and I suspect this storyline of a broken, grieving main character dealing with death in the haunted house are remnants of what was probably a more interesting and adult version of this movie directed by Guillermo del Toro and likely starring Ryan Gosling. And all throughout the movie, the film that Guillermo del Toro, I suspect, wanted to make, this is just a suspicion, I don't have proof for this, this is just my interpretation, clashes with the generic, pathetic Disney movie that is here. I loathed parts of this movie. I mean, there's a scene where the main character is in a chair and he describes his grieving process with, it was my fault she died. If only I hadn't been so horrible to her and we hadn't fought beforehand and all this stuff, and she wouldn't have died. And then the like clockwork, he finishes delivering this really sad moment and the music plays, and immediately they do that fucking shit where a character undercuts it with a joke. And it was a horrible joke. It was a terrible joke Danny DeVito delivered, who, as an aside, I normally adore Danny DeVito. He is not funny in this movie. He has like one funny line. A lot of the characters in this movie are actors I really like, and they deliver just bad jokes. I don't know who the medium was. I don't think I've seen her in anything before, but oh my god, that character should not have been in this movie. They had no place in the film. The aesthetic, the idea of a psychic and this sort of genre is really good, but boy, she does nothing in this movie, and in fact, I would say actively detracts from it. It's back to what I was talking about. The scene is immediately undercut with a joke, and I was mad. It was like a really heartfelt, sweet scene. In a different movie, it could have been the emotional core of the whole film, but they undercut it with a terrible joke. The character mentions, and there's one more thing in this I really like. The ending, like the literal last scene, that's before they do a dance number with a bunch of ghosts. They should have ended it while they were ahead. The main character talks throughout the movie about things called ghost signs, my father used to play with model trains, and all throughout the house I would hear, model trains go off when I was down. I think the psychic actually delivers that line, so maybe I'm wrong. Maybe she is slightly relevant, but at the end of the movie, the main character, there's been a cat trying to get into his door, and the main character finally decides to interact with the cat as sort of, I guess, a metaphor for his grief. It wants to be let in, and he won't let it in, yada, 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 and at the end he finally lets it in. And he looks at its name, and it's named Tater Tot, if I recall, which is a callback to his wife having loved tater tots. It's mentioned all throughout the movies, and he interprets it as a ghost sign. It's a genuinely sweet and heartfelt moment, and it closes up what I suspect was supposed to be the arc of most of this movie. And I actually like that. And then they immediately smash cut to him going back to the Haunted Mansion, and the ghosts sing their little musical number, and it just didn't work. That part, just like back to the silly. The two tones here clash. You can either be a dumb kids movie with A-list celebrities delivering jokes that don't land, or you can be an interesting exploration of grief with some mild, fantastical horror elements that are, at a level that young children can enjoy them. There's some good gateway horror here. There's some creepy visuals, a fun sequence involving an axe ghost. My biggest complaint with the action and the general ghost visuals is how much CGI there is in this movie. It's actually absurd. A lot of it's really bad CGI. There's some cool visuals, and a lot of the sets, like the expanding sets and stuff, they seem to be practical maybe, or CGI, but it's convincing. But then the ghosts show up, and they don't look good at all. They look very fake, and I don't know, I feel like you could have done this better practically, like much better. Which leads me to one more complaint. The budget for this movie is like $160 million, and there is no reason this movie should be nearly as expensive as it is. This is an actual cry for help to Disney. You guys are literally in the biggest slump of your life as far as finances go because you keep throwing money, absurd amounts of money at projects that frankly don't need them. Lower budgets breed creativity, the need to do things practically because you can't afford to make shitty CGI ghosts. It is not hard to make a ghost. Look, I'm going to do it now in 2 minutes without using After Effects. Oh, woo, I'm a spooky ghost. Oh my god. Is that convincing? No. Did it cost $150 million? No. There's so much CGI in this movie that just looks awful. For instance, they have Jamie Lee Curtis, who plays a dead psychic, and she's in a what do you call it, crystal ball, and she's all CGI inside the crystal ball for no reason. We see her physically on set, so it wasn't like she would only do voice acting. She's on set, so why not get her head and put it inside a crystal ball? Like, record her actual head instead of doing it in all CGI. Because it looks horrible. It looks really, really bad. And it's super distracting. And I just, like, I'm thinking that's $10 million right there to do that effect, which they could have done practically. It would have looked better. It would have been more visually interesting. It would have hired more people, probably. And, you know, I don't know. This is a direct call out. You guys don't understand how to make a movie anymore. You guys have become so complacent with CGI that you turn out a movie like this that just looks ugly a lot of the time. There's some cool lighting in here, but like when the ghosts are on screen, they look really fake. Some of the effects in the original Haunted Mansion movie, which I haven't seen in years, I would say they look more convincing than what's in here. And that is not okay. Larger budget, 20 years removed. I want to say, like, if you are in the mood for a horror movie involving a haunted house and you are above the age of 12, go onto Netflix, click on The Haunting of Hill House, and watch that instead. That show is incredibly excellent. It deals with themes of grief and everything in a much better way than this movie. This movie, it wants to be like almost like a superhero movie. It has like the big climactic battle at the end. The movie builds up that the villain needs a willing soul, and the movie is like almost implying that the main character is going to give into his grief and become a willing soul to save the friends he's made in the haunted house or whatever. And the ghost is tempting him with seeing his dead wife, and he's still that guy who's caught up in his grief. And then he makes a very mature decision not to do that and to not give this guy a soul. And I actually thought that might be how they defeat the ghost, kind of like he makes that decision, he saves the day, it ties into the emotional arc. And then the Danny DeVito comes running in or the psychic comes running in on a horse, a ghost horse, and they have a big battle with like swords and explosions and ghosts, and they send him to hell. And I could have done without that. I think the simplistic, dumbed down version, sometimes less is more, people. The character overcoming his grief to demonstrate that it is possible to the young boy who's grieving over the death of his father is much more interesting to me than CGI horse riding and some goofy one-liners. There are so many bad jokes all throughout this movie. I didn't find this movie funny, but the people in the theater around me seemed to think it was a real hoot and holler. I was sitting next to who might have been, you know, that like cliche about the Disney adult that you see on the internet. I was sitting next to a Disney adult, and he was like clapping like a seal and laughing at everything. So hey man, if you're a Disney adult, this movie is for you. Honestly, I kind of hoped for this movie to be good. I went in with some expectations of this maybe being kind of an interesting little thing. I didn't get that. I found this movie to be, almost interesting, but not there. And in fact, what it could have been, I could see it so clearly. I could see what this movie could have been, and it wasn't, and that made me upset because the stuff that wasn't what was interesting was so unbelievably, unforgivably bad and not interesting. So yeah, I'm going to give this movie like a 5.5 or a 6 out of 10. I did not care for it. I have one last nitpick about the Haunted Mansion movie. The product placement in this movie is unforgivably silly. The little boy has action figures that he plays with all throughout the movie. And they're all Marvel characters, specifically ones that are prominent in the MCU. And then at one point the kid's like, let's play a board game. This comes out of nowhere for no reason. He's like, let's play a board game. And he brings out Marvel Monopoly. And they do like a money shot on the Marvel Monopoly. Like the camera zooms in over the Marvel Monopoly. And I found that to be like almost amusingly bad. There was a bunch of other stuff that was clearly product placement. I can't think of it now, but like I had meant to make mental notes of it throughout the movie, and now I can't remember it. There's one other thing I like in this movie. There's a ghost that is a sailor, and he strikes a bargain with the heroes to help them in exchange for them taking him to the sea. There's some cool visuals with him summoning an ocean inside of a house, and he leaves behind wet footprints everywhere he goes. It's kind of a creepy ghost. I like that. And I like that he sort of becomes their ally, and he always flips the TV to Deadliest Catch. And I think that's kind of funny. You can kind of like build up this personality for a ghost that longs to be at the sea, and at the end of the movie he gets to go. That's kind of cute. I like that as far as like a kid's movie little arc. That's cute. So, you know, there's some brilliant stuff in here. There's some really good ideas in here. And then they're just sort of undercut by all of the corporate, generic, safe, sanitized stuff that I think pads out the middle parts. For a movie about a house full of ghosts, they play it remarkably safe with everything in here. There's never any real peril for any characters that I really feel outside of like one or two moments. And the stuff where I feel that sort of fear really feels like it was a remnant from the Guillermo del Toro movie that this could have been. So yeah, I wasn't too big a fan here. Also, apparently Jared Leto was in this. Looking up at it afterwards, I think he's the Hatbox Ghost, the one that's famous from The Ride. And I like how the Hatbox Ghost looks. Didn't sound like Jared Leto. You couldn't ever see his face at any point in time. So I don't know if Jared Leto even, like, I guess he recorded 10 lines and they slapped his name on this thing. He's like top billed for some reason. But yeah, I don't like Jared Leto. He was terrible as a Joker. Obviously, the only role that really redeemed his whole career was the immense Michael Morbius. But this is more evidence to the inflated budget of this movie. Owen Wilson, Danny DeVito, and Jared Leto do not need to be in this movie. They could have been replaced with beginning actors who are trying to make a name for themselves, and they probably would have given a much more interesting performance. Slapping these big-name budget actors into a movie to try to sell it when, you know, movies used to kind of sell themselves kind of irks me a little bit. I don't know. You need to make some creative choices. They always just do everything for, like, this movie just feels very corporate, very pandering, and I don't know. This one in particular, it's just like, it's evident of a problem I've seen growing, and it all kind of boiled over for me watching this. This is the most Disney movie I've ever seen. I don't watch those live-action remakes anymore, but this felt a lot like that. But then there's just that glimmer of something almost good. I'm going to stop ranting about this movie now. I've been repeating myself for a while. 5.5 or 6 out of 10. You know, whatever. If you have kids, they'll probably enjoy this. It's a good gateway horror movie if you want your kids to be in the horror when they grow up. Maybe, you know, test the waters or something like this. If you're an adult, again, go watch Hill House instead. I've been Bjorn. I'm movie archaeologist man. I'm going deeper into the temple. I've got Harry Potter Murder Mystery coming out, I think this week, probably Thursday, Friday. And if you're looking for something else to watch, Suicide Squad, more reviews. Please remember to like and subscribe. I will see you all in the next one.